In 1999, my name was Krupa. Aw, wasn't I such a happy baby? I was an orphan at John Abraham Memorial Bethany Home in Tandoor, India. I had parents waiting for me in America, but the orphanage had some shutdowns and many pushbacks, so my dad decided to go to India and get me because my family was tired of waiting. After denying my adoption for 16 years, I slowly integrated myself into Indian culture until I wanted to dive deep into my adoption. Hi, I'm Krupa. Well, Lillian, or more commonly known as Lily. Just take off the AN. Now you know part of my story. John Abraham Memorial Bethany Home was where I spent my first year of life. The orphanage is a special one. If you Google it, you'll find many, many articles. But I'm here to talk about the article stories as well as experiences shared with me from people that were at the orphanage and worked at the orphanage. Let's get into it. Many of us adoptees were sent home with a story that our families were too sick to take care of us, maybe we were left at the gate of the orphanage, or that they just had too many children and they had to work. Unfortunately, that only skims the line of the truth. In the 70s, John Abraham opened up as Kokila Home by Savitri's father. Savitri Samson/Kumar took over at some point and it became John Abraham Memorial Bethany Home. During the same time, there were a few other orphanages opened. The other orphanages opened were Action for Social Development, St. Theresa's Tender Loving Care Home, Precious Moments, Indian Council for Social Welfare, Good Samaritan, Evangelical, Welfare Association. Some of the smaller ones were Radha Kishan Home, Guild of Services, Mission to the Nations, Sparsh, Buzz Blossom, and Tabernacle School of Evangelism. Outside the area of Hyderabad is where the Lambada live. The Lambada are tribal people who have a lot of poverty, lack of education, and a very negative bias towards women. It's said that if you are the 3rd, 6th, or 9th girl in your family, you are bad luck, but also they see women as bad luck because they don't see them as sturdy to work in fields or just to work in general. And so the orphanages saw this as an opportunity to profit, and that's what they did. The process would kind of look like an associate would go to these tandas. They would either find someone who's pregnant and they would pay them to give them the baby when the baby was born. They would find someone who just gave birth to a baby and give them money directly for the baby, and they would take the baby. Or it would be a family member working with the associate to take the baby, like to sneak the baby away during the nighttime or whenever. So it could have been any of these 3 processes. The amount of money that it looked like that these women were getting for the babies, it ranged from about 150 rupees to 1,500 rupees, from what I understand. So it could be anywhere from $2 to $70, but still not very much. Another way that they had obtained children was they would find parents of children and they would say that they're going to send them to this boarding school and have the parents pay a fee up front. They would take the child and then they would end up being sent to America. Eventually, some of the practices were discovered and one orphanage like ASD lost their license, but they reopened and worked with John Abraham Memorial Bethany Home. And then the big shutdown happened in 2001. So all the orphanages were shut down then. Some of them turned into schools to soften the blow. As it for John Abraham Memorial Bethany Home, when it was shut down, the staff and the owner fled, leaving the babies not taken care for, in diapers, and hungry. Eventually, the police came and they took the babies to a place called Sishu Vihar. So once they reached Sishu Vihar, apologies if I'm not pronouncing that correctly, they started the process to try and relocate these children to their families. And that's when they found out what had been happening at the orphanages this whole time. In order for a child to be given up for adoption, they must be relinquished through a relinquishment document. This document has the parents or a family member sign these papers saying that they relinquished the child and they can be given up for adoption. But at least for John Abraham and probably these other ones too, there were a lot of inconsistencies. So for example, if a baby came in on the 15th, they would have bought these relinquishment papers on the 28th, and then they had their vaccines on the 25th. So it just didn't line up. In 2018, that's when I went to India. I decided that I wanted to go just to understand more about where I came from and just to see. And I was only left with the story that I was left at the gate and no family came to claim me, but it was still sketchy and we didn't know for sure what was actually the truth. It was either the night before or the day after we went to the orphanage that my mom found a blog about their experience going back to the orphanage, and it had some interesting information, and it was very similar in some ways to the one that we had visiting the orphanage. Later in that week, I decided to do my own research and really deep dive into all the articles where I found all the information I'm telling you now. It definitely was a big hit because I had only known so little, and to have all this information spewed at me was a lot at once. Going back to the orphanage, the building where the babies were taken care of is still up. Savitri's home is still there, but the place where older children either slept or were taught school is down. But the building for babies is still there, and you can go visit. I met Savitri and some potential workers from that time and children that lived there during that time. The tension was a little high because I knew that there was more to the story than I was being told. We had a little bit of knowledge that it was a scandal back then, and a lot of it was Savitri telling me how grateful I should be that I have a family in America and that she placed all these children into adoption in these countries. While I am very grateful for having adoption, that doesn't take away from my experience that I am having now, realizing all this and before I could understand anything. So I still am very grateful for my adoption, but just know. The day after, we went to Kodangal, which is supposedly the city that I was born in, and we went to visit there. We didn't get to explore too much because our driver's car broke down and we just had to stay in the city where all the shops were, so we couldn't really explore too much. I just wanted to document everything that I experienced and learned on this trip really quickly when I got back to America, and that's what I did, and I put it out. And soon after that, I was contacted by at least 2 people, and then it's just been building ever since, and now there's a little community of us. I later learned that the agencies did not know what was going on. There was an agency worker that went and visited the orphanage, but she said that it seemed all normal when she went, and none of the agency that I went through, they didn't know anything about it. And a lot of times, my dad went to go get me in India, and some other people had their families go get them or visit them while they were in India, and you wouldn't have known that anything was going on because they hired people to act as ayahs, which are people that take care of the babies, and they would hire them for the day to act in this charade for a little bit until they left. But in reality, we found out that the babies were being taken care of by older children. Not only that, but children were being abused by faculty, and also there were babies that were being buried because they were not properly taken care of, or other circumstances that I am not allowed to discuss, at least on YouTube. Prospective families were paying $5,000 to $15,000 per adoption for these children, while Lambada children were being paid for mere $20, which is upsetting to think about that price being put on a human and on yourself. When I visited India, Savitri mentioned something about my files a few times, but she never let me see them. Someone who visited India before me saw that the papers were in the trash, some of them being burned, and there's a possibility that they're locked in a room right now, but nobody's had access to them yet. I say yet. Where I am now is I have deleted all my old videos, probably at this point by the time this video is going up, because 1, I wanted to update information and condense this video into one little thing. I have a friend who's in India right now from the orphanage, and we've been working together for the last 4 years, and he is working to find his biological family and working to help me find mine. So if you're just a viewer or you're someone that's from the orphanage, I'm sure you're wondering how you can take steps to find your family. I'm not gonna lie with you, it's a little tricky. So the first thing I would say is you need to find a relinquishment document. The relinquishment document will give you your biological parents' names, your birthday, which is not super important, the place you were supposedly born, and that's pretty much all you need. Sometimes I've noticed as a common theme that children from John Abraham Memorial Bethany Home do not have the relinquishment document. You can contact your adoption agency to see if they do have those files, but they might only have what you have, but it's always worth a shot trying to find what you can from them. I recommend taking a DNA test. 23andMe has been very helpful. My friend and I, we have found 3rd to 5th cousins, which are the most important ones. As I've connected with them, I found that they are also from other orphanages that were in this ring of trafficking, and that means that we are all probably Lambada children, and we all were probably at least somewhere from the same area, possibly. That being said, my friend and I have found someone's family, their biological family, through DNA and through relinquishment documents, and backtracking. And he's pretty close to finding his own family, we think. The story about that woman is she said that she had her baby, and only about 2 to 3 days later, the baby was taken away from her in the night because her husband had planned to have the baby taken away. So the one thing that it does come down to is it seems like you do have to go to India eventually to get the answers that you want. You have to talk and wait around for a little bit too. My friend and I have done this work for 4 years, and it's been a lot of back and forth. I get excited about the tiniest bit of information. Like, I have my biological parents' names now, which I did not have at all before. If you're from John Abraham Memorial Bethany Home, there is a somewhat active Facebook group, and I can shoot you the link if you shoot me a message on my website through my contact form, or you can send me a message on Instagram, and both of those will be below. I am also thinking about making just a general Hyderabad adoption support group if you're from one of these orphanages that were part of this trafficking ring. And if you are part of a different orphanage, please shoot me a message and I will happily do it. And as I get more messages, I'll just keep sending them the link too, because it would be helpful to help everybody, especially since we're all probably from the same area. It'll be really helpful. I'm happy to talk to anyone, exchange photos, videos, and just listen, because I know what's going on. I know how you feel. So feel free to shoot me a message. I love talking, and I would love to talk to you too. I would also try my best as much as I can to help you find your biological families. And I do want to go back to India eventually, which is where, like I said, it comes down to. You probably have to go to India to get more information. I have a friend named Chris, and his story is on a blog called 3 in a Mystery by his friend Wyatt. This is where I first found out that people went to the orphanage, and I will link that below. One day I would hope that this can turn into something bigger, but I'm going to take it one day at a time. And thank you for listening. I hope you learned something and you've taken something from this. And if you want to help in any way, we could use the help for my big project or just for anything. Thanks for listening and watching.
I am so cold.